Welcome, Dolphins fans, haters, and everyone in between to your favorite show discussing the greatest franchise in sports, the Miami Dolphins. This is the PhinsPod. My name is Moose, your host, and the offseason continues to roll along. Each day that passes getting us closer and closer to feeling truly alive again. And in the meantime, as we wait for training camp, the preseason, and football season in earnest, we have to focus on the most important aspect of the team, the roster. Managing the roster is a task for one Chris Grier, but a lot goes into roster management, and that includes balancing egos. Justified or not, a player can be driven away from the team due to issues deriving from money. And unfortunately, that seems to be brewing for the Dolphins right now. We're going to touch on that, as well as what Miami can do in the alternative. Who should we look to as guys who need to step up? Speaking of stepping up, the Dolphins do have an open competition at one particular spot on the offense, and the guy who could win it may surprise you. Without further ado, let's dive in.
But you need good corners out there that can hold their own in space. And Xavien he's at the top of that list in the league with a lot of talented corners. So when you go and you see these guys, you still want to be up in that highest paid type conversation. And he went out there and earned it. He was healthy. He played through some injuries this year. And that's been one of the knocks on his career early on. Couldn't stay healthy. And now being healthy and getting older at the same time, you want to get as much of that money in your pocket as humanly possible. So I think they figured something out before the season. I talked to Xavien a couple of days ago. He's in good spirits. He's working, and I'm sure the Dolphins they got the money. I just saw Ross sliding down the slide inside the facility, so they can be creative and figure something out.
Before we jump into the potential issues brewing in the defensive backfield, let's talk about something more hopeful. Over the past 15 to 20 years, the Miami Dolphins have been living in a cycle of mediocrity. And I know I just said hopeful, but bear with me. It sucks to admit it, but it's something that we all live through and the place that we're all desperately hoping to climb out of. Having a team that can win on any given Sunday, and more importantly, a club we as members of the pod can be proud of. That's all we can ask for as Dolphins fans. One of the reasons, among so many other factors, of course, but one of the reasons that the Dolphins struggled to win consistently was an inability to develop talent. There are really only a few things that you need to do right as team executives. 1, identify talent. 2, acquire that talent. 3, hire coaches who can develop that talent. And then 4, retain the talent at the right time and at the right cost. Miami struggled to do most all of these things, but perhaps their biggest flaw was an inability to develop the talent that they did manage to bring in. Think about all the players who did better once they left the Dolphins, Wes Welker, or who did worse when they joined us, Brandon Marshall. So it does make sense. We've been conditioned to not even consider that players are going to get better over time. Players that we bring in will improve while they're with the Dolphins. What a crazy thought, right? Having good coaches who work with guys out of sight and out of mind for fans, but actually get guys to become viable players in a system and at the pro level. Now, looking at this current iteration of the Miami Dolphins regime, maybe we need to reassess the way we do overall look at our franchise. Since 2019, when Flores and Grier began this journey, they managed to bring in some good young players. You got Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, Myles Gaskin, and guys who came in before. Young guys who have now spent more time under Flo than they did under Gase before him. Guys like Mike Gesicki, Jerome Baker, and even Durham Smythe, who seems to have found more of a role than we thought, and he's improved his all-around game over the years as well. All of these guys have improved over time. At different rates, of course. Obviously, a guy like Jerome Baker is improving a lot faster than a guy like Durham Smythe is, and Christian Wilkins has improved a little less quickly than Andrew Van Ginkel, who, considering his draft stock, has really, really improved within this system. But all of their development has been a good indication that Flores and his staff are good teachers, and they know how to keep their guys confident and invested so that they do get better. However, one guy who just jumps off the list of draft picks, a name that has been absent from the Dolphins' recent success, a guy who was brought in by this regime, is 2019 third-round pick, 78th overall, Michael Deiter. Deiter was an offensive guard who played all over the line for Wisconsin, and he was pegged to be a high-floor guy. But that really wasn't the case. Due to how bad the team was in 2019, Deiter played a good amount for the Dolphins, starting 15 games at guard. He was by no means good, struggling to anchor, and he was getting beat often, allowing athletic interior linemen to work around him and strong, bull-rushing defensive tackles to go right through him. It was clear he needed time to get stronger. The Dolphins needed to improve at the position. It was that simple. He may have needed time to let the game slow down. That could have been a mental thing too for him, but physically, he just was not strong enough to hang with the beasts of the NFL, and that was seen every Sunday. So now, as he enters his third season in the league, Deiter has managed to hang around, even playing in spurts last year. And looking at the offensive line right now, almost every slot has a projected starter, someone we can pencil in. At left tackle, you got Austin Jackson. Left guard, Solomon Kindley. Right guard, Robert Hunt. Right tackle, Liam Eichenberg, of course, if he can hold off Jesse Davis, DJ Fluker, or even recently signed Jermaine Eluemunor. The only spot where there is no seasoned vet or high-ceiling youngster is at the center position, arguably the most important position across the line. The team is not necessarily reeling from the loss of some superstar there, though. Ted Karras manned the role for Miami last year, doing adequately but not really earning long-term confidence from the men upstairs. So there is an opening. And not to mention, he went and signed with New England to be their backup center. So I think that says all you need to know about the quality of starter we had. So this season, there's an opening. And to fill it in, Miami brought in former Ravens center Matt Skura, the guy with the yips. Although many presume him to be the starter for Miami due to his experience compared to everyone else on the roster, he isn't some home run lock at the position. No, Miami has an opportunity, and it appears that our friend Michael Deiter may have an opportunity, a chance to fulfill his third-round draft billing from just a few seasons back and claim the role. Flores himself noted that there was a sense of urgency coming from Deiter, something that the team values. But going back to what we started talking about at the top of the show, this coaching staff is different than the coaching staffs we've had in the past. He's not Joe Philbin. He's not Adam Gase. And if this coaching staff are a group of leaders that we have been looking for to get out of mediocrity, then they could very well have coached up a guy like Deiter. Throw him in the weight room, build up his confidence to the point where he has a shot to start and actually be a contributing force for the team. One of the key factors to building a championship team involves developing players within your own building and not relying solely on free agency and first-round picks to get you out of a hole. That never works. What works is finding guys and having a program in place where growth is achievable. Not just growth, but growth to a point where a player can actually be impactful for you going forward. And that's what Michael Deiter has had the last 2 seasons and now 2 off seasons to focus on. Entering his third year, he has the best shot to snag the starting center spot ahead of Cameron Tom, who was signed a few months back from the Saints, as well as Matt Skura, who many believe has the lead. But there is no doubt that there isn't a clear-cut starter, and Deiter has every opportunity. If Michael Deiter, over the last two off seasons, in the Dolphin system with these coaches, if he was able to get stronger in his base, more consistent with his punch, and just play at a faster rate, then he could very well earn the center position. And in that case, Miami's offensive line will exclusively feature talent that Chris Grier and Brian Flores drafted. Austin Jackson, Solomon Kindley, Michael Deiter, Robert Hunt, and Liam Eichenberg. That's not too shabby, considering that this line is projected, again, we'll see, but they're projected to be the best that the Dolphins have had in some time, and going forward, they can develop together. This is the best young core of offensive linemen, that's for sure, that the team has had in a long time. Personally, I'm rooting for Deiter. In his early interviews when he came in as a rookie, he seemed like a good, tough kid. It just seems that toughness is got to be real, because Brian Flores would not let a softie sit around for 2 seasons on the bench doing nothing. And if you think about it, not a lot of players kind of had Deiter's arc in this regime, where they started but then got benched. Usually those guys were sent out the building, but he got benched, he stayed around, he showed the coaches that he was in on it, he was in on the program, he was going to work every day and get better, and we're going to find out as camp gets started in a month or so whether or not he showed enough improvement to get a shot to start. Okay, so in last week's episode, we touched on the Xavien Howard mess, and yes, it is a mess. And the reason for that is simple. These contract holdouts usually happen when a player is looking for a long-term deal. It rarely occurs in the manner that's happening right now. A guy who signed a 5-year contract extension just 2 years ago, still under contract through 2024, is holding out for more yearly money. And as a fan, I can tell you I'm frustrated. On one hand, you can blame Howard, and I saw many of you in the comments section last week doing exactly that, essentially stating that if he felt that he was more valuable, he shouldn't have signed the contract. A deal is a deal, and the Dolphins are not obliged to raise his pay. And I agree, that much is very true. The Dolphins don't have to do anything and could just let him bleed money and hope he changes his mind and comes back to the team. However, considering the context, the fact that he has been wanting to be the highest paid corner from the beginning, and the deal he took, a 5-year, $75 million extension back in 2019, was more a result of where he was then in his career. Blossoming, I mean, we all knew he was a stud, but he hadn't earned enough cachet to really get that long-term deal, keeping him up there in the highest paid corner echelon. He was replaced as the top paid corner within weeks of him signing the deal, and now, 2 years later, he's fallen all the way down to the 12th highest paid corner in 2021. And this is where we have to be real and not just blind fans of the laundry. Imagine this. Xavien Howard signs that extension back in 2019 like he did, and then in 2019, he has a mediocre to below average season. He doesn't play well even when he plays. And then last year, he gets hurt, misses most of the games. He then comes back this offseason, looks a step slower in camp. The coaches just don't think he has the same explosion, which again makes him that great corner. Do you think if this scenario had played out, that Miami would be looking to honor that contract? You think they would, like, they're going to sit there and be like, well, a deal's a deal, right, Xavien? We signed it, so we're going to hold it the way it is because, a deal's a deal. No, hell no. You and I both know that isn't how this works, and that's not how NFL teams operate. They jostle players around, premier athletes, just to save a few bucks. Fans don't bicker and gripe then because usually it benefits the team. When you cut a guy and don't honor his contract because he sucked, fans don't, moan about that. They don't care. But when a really good athlete starts asking to be paid fairly, now some fans have a problem. So look, Xavien Howard has clearly played well above his contract, and he's looking for proper compensation. So he's soft? No, please. He's just a man looking for the proper recognition, which all of us do. You do. As you're coming back from work or going to work, you want to be paid for the work you're putting in and the outcome that your company and organization you're working for is getting from your work. That's why you can't begrudge him, right? You really can't, because not only do we all do that, but it's not just about recognition. That money that he's seeking is going to set up his family for generations, his kids' kids, and that's something you can't begrudge a man for wanting. And that's why I went from thinking that this might pass and Miami's just going to pay to being a little annoyed at X to now, that was of course selfish, to now being where I am, where, look, the man deserves to get paid. He earned that with a near historic season, which nearly propelled us to the playoffs, and I hope we can make that work. But if he really wants to get paid and isn't willing to take a more team-friendly deal, then yeah, Miami may have to move on from X and deal him, which would break my heart, and I know would break a lot of your hearts too. And the reason they have to move on from him, it doesn't boil down to an attitude problem or the Dolphins setting a bad precedent here. No, teams don't operate on precedents. They operate on a case-by-case basis and are always angling to have that specific case benefit them. There's no precedent set. That's very rare. The only precedent that's set is in terms of the amount of money a player is going to make. If the top corner of the league makes $17 million one year, then that's the precedent of the baseline for a contract. But in terms of how they manage each player individually on their team, they have to treat players differently. That's how it works. That happens at your own jobs, where the new intern is not going to get the same leeway that, the guy who's been there for 8 years and has put in work is going to get. It's just the way humans operate, and it makes sense. So no, the Dolphins are not going to get that team-friendly deal, considering he has held out. The problem here, regardless of the way you feel about Xavien Howard, if we're looking to bring him back and make him a Dolphin in 2021, the problem is that they owe him right now $12.5 million, and they only have about $5 million in cap space to work with for this season. On top of that, they still need to sign some prominent rookies, including Javon Holland, Liam Eichenberg, and Hunter Long, all day 2 picks. So that's going to eat up a good chunk of that $5 million in cap left. If the Dolphins make some cuts and adjustments around the roster, pay the rookies, and then you give X the whole $5 million that's remaining, not only will that leave the Dolphins pretty unflexible for the next month or two before training camp, but he would be only the third highest paid corner, tied with Jalen Ramsey at $17.5 million. Hopefully that would be enough for him if that's how the Dolphins proceed to operate, but it seems like he wants to be the highest paid corner, and that's just not something Miami can feasibly actually do right now. So as much as I want to keep him, I just don't think the Dolphins are going to extend themselves so much just for one player, no matter how great that player is. And this is a situation that's going to continue to develop. We're going to stay on it, but the longer the holdout takes, the more apparent that the two sides are not close becomes. In that case, Miami should do the smart move, and while his value is as high as ever, look to flip Howard to a team that's willing to make him the highest paid corner, and those teams are out there. Miami is likely going to look to get a depth player in return, along with some draft capital. Not ideal when you lose a great corner, but expect Greer to make something work and ultimately help the team as much as possible given the circumstances. I mean, losing the top corner in the league is going to sting quite a bit, but if Miami can get some solid return, then not only will they acquire some more assets via the draft, but a ton of money is going to open up for the next few years, allowing for more movement across the roster and for them to re-sign some other key pieces. Put that money that was going to Howard to other developmental guys. Mike Gesicki, anyone? And if that is the case and the Dolphins do move on, then who should we all have our eyes on in the secondary? Byron Jones. Byron Jones was brought in last offseason, a former first-round pick of the Cowboys, and he has been somewhat of a disappointment so far. Again, you got to understand that the scales for him are a lot higher than for other players. You know, he wasn't bad by any stretch in 2020, but he was not nearly as shut down or a solid tackler as we expected when we signed the 28-year-old to a 5-year, $82.5 million deal. He has to improve. And not only that, but he's going to take the mantle of cornerback one. Again, this is all if we deal Xavien. So not only is he going to be forced to improve because now he's going to be tasked with matching up and taking out the opposing team's top receiving threat, something that Xavien Howard has been doing. So Byron Jones has all the tools to do it, and he has proven his capability to do that in the past. And to be fair to Jones, it was his first year in the Brian Flores defense and scheme. It's complicated, and it does ask a lot from its defensive back specifically compared to a lot of other defenses. Another year in the system will no doubt help his game get better. He should be better this year. And look, he's going to know all the calls now, be able to switch properly, and avoid any unforced errors. And most importantly, if Xavien is gone, it's going to be his job to step up as a leader, communicate on the back end with the safeties and the other corners just to make sure everyone is lined up right and everyone knows their assignments. Byron Jones absolutely has the smarts to do it, and physically, he's arguably the most gifted guy on the roster. So you know that, physically that's there as well, along with his leadership and mental acuity to the game. Of course, guys like Noah Monogany, Justin Coleman, the free agent pickup from Detroit, we're also going to need to see them step up, but the team does have a pretty good abundance of DBs who could at least attempt to pick up the slack, which would be left behind in Xavien Howard's wake. What do you guys think? Is Xavien Howard going to be retained by the Dolphins, or are things headed south? Let us know in the comments below. And also, how would you feel about Michael Deiter redeeming himself and becoming a starter at center for the Fins? Does it show that the team can now actually develop and bring their players along? Or is it more an indictment on the position as a whole and how the team has not placed the necessary resources there leading up to camp? The fact that Michael Deiter is a potential starter is more of a bad thing than a sign of development. Let us know what you think in the comments or on Twitter and Instagram at PhinsPod.
When I had him, he was extremely weak. I think I was quoted in another interview saying he was like 60% health. And that's not an exaggeration. That's a pretty legit estimation.
So what's the like when you spoke to him, I guess maybe after minicamp, like what are his reviews now? Like just how he feels like compared to where he was, the journey you guys have kind of been with it, with the whole rehab process.
It's when you're feeling healthy, when your body's feeling good, not only are you moving well, but your psyche, your confidence is up. And his confidence was up. I know he had a terrible practice, where he threw 5 picks. I talked to him after that. He's like, dude, it's all good, man. We
heard that was in a monsoon too.
Yeah. And I mean, he honestly though, it doesn't matter. It's funny. There was one day of this off season where we're out in the field and Tua had all his receivers. He had all of his guys, all of his Dolphins receivers. And they're in the middle of the field, and they're just doing some pat and go stuff, warming up, throwing hitches, 3-step drop, 5-step drop, just getting warmed up before they get into a script that Tua had prepared for them. And all of a sudden, the skies opened up, and it starts pouring rain. And I'm on the other side of the field. I was with, I believe, Devin Singletary and maybe Dalvin. I was doing running back drills. I wasn't even a part of Tua's practice that he had put together. The skies open up, and it starts raining, and me, Devin, and Dalvin are staying. We're still doing our work, but all the receivers ran off the field and got under my tent. And there was just one guy that stayed out there. and it was Tua. And everyone's like, Tua, what are you doing, man? He goes, no, what are you doing? I'm trying to get better. We're going to probably have to play in this kind of stuff. So it's funny, man, that Albert Wilson runs out, Devontae runs back out. All these guys run back out, and they practice in the rain. So Tua understands that there's going to be situations like that. He knows he's going to have to make big throws in situations like that. It's going to happen.
That's going to do it for us here today. Thank you guys so much for listening to the PhinsPod. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Timothy Ritchie, member of the pod and supporter of the show on Patreon. Check that out. Links in the description, or head to patreon.com/PhinsPod. Thank you so much for the support. And please remember to like the video if you enjoyed the show on YouTube, as well as subscribe just so you never miss a chance to chat about your Miami Dolphins. Remember that the PhinsPod's available on all platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and of course YouTube. Continue the conversation with us over on Twitter and Instagram @PhinsPod. I hope you all have an amazing day, and until next time, stay safe. Love y'all.